Now I'd like to introduce to you Brian Fent, who is a GCA parent. Brian is a citizen of heaven, devoted husband, and father of three. He said he wanted to keep it simple. I would add valuable and cherished friend to GCA. Brian Fent.
I was actually going to sing for you tonight, but there's no way I will do that now after that wonderful performance. So I'm just going to speak what I have to say. July 2020, just about a few weeks after the stay-at-home order within New York was lifted, my wife and I found ourselves sitting on the lawn of a church in Bayside, New York, which at that point in time required us to register via email. And months prior to that, New York City schools had shut down and moved to remote learning, which was essentially their discontinuance of education altogether for the remainder of the school year. So what came with that as parents was strife and stress and the newness of having to teach your children at home when you were formerly relying upon a public school system that now has become obviously deficient. And so, for us, it became apparent that this model of teaching and education needed to change. As it turns out, we had decided and prepared to educate our kids at home. And we planned all summer long the way we would do it. There were desks purchased. The specific location of where each kid would learn, how they would learn was all planned out until this church from Bayside emailed me one Wednesday night because I had to register. They had my email, and this is what the message said, very simply: Grace Christian Academy in Merrick, New York is open and accepting applications. And that Wednesday evening, I spoke to my wife very briefly and said, I want to explore this more. And I called literally that night. Surprisingly, no one answered, though, at 9 p.m. I'm not sure why. Mr. Schultz is probably something you can work on. But they did call me back the next morning promptly. So by the time I got the phone call, I had set up a meeting with Mr. Schultz that afternoon at lunch, and he was gracious enough to come in. I think you were wearing gym shorts on your vacation day to meet with me, a complete stranger that he didn't know, but someone that was interested in the school, which, just as an aside, is a testimony of the generosity and the compassion and the sacrifice that this school does embody regularly. So 2 hours of his time and my time were spent going through the school, and he was giving me a tour and explaining to me how this education system works. And by the end of that 2 hours, I was certain that this was a place where my children will be attending school, and simultaneously was wondering how I could enroll as a student as well. I was marveling at the education and what kindergarteners through 5th grade, 6th grade, and up through the high school are learning, and I was envious. And there's one very, very interesting and core component of what differentiates GCA, and that's the trivium. And this was brand new to me, something I didn't understand, but for those that are unaware, as I was, the trivium is a method of thinking which is comprised of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. You can see over there. You can come back later and read that after we're done. But this word trivium, it comes from this word which means three ways, or the meeting of three paths, which is hence the name trivium, which comes from try. I'm not really a linguist at all. I'm just sharing with you what I studied on my own to learn. However, the components, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, are summarized simply. Grammar is the art of language, logic is the art of thinking, and rhetoric, the art of communication. So the trivium simply represents the natural order of thinking. The natural order of thinking. And in a world right now, unless you've been living under a rock, the world right now seems to be bent on forcing people to think a certain way, whereas the trivium and the classical education model is training people, encouraging people, prompting people to be able to think for themselves. To oversimplify the trivium, this is a focus on how to think rather than what to think. knowing this was the educational model for GCA, I fell in love. And this is actually the reason why I wanted to go back, to learn this, to understand this, to benefit from it. Fortunately, my children are the beneficiaries of this education, and by association, therefore, I am as well. So, if you find yourself in this world that is ripe with conflict, disagreement, utter foolishness, rebellion against God, a rejection of logic, reason, sound thinking, there's something you can actually do about that. That's support Grace Christian Academy and support the children that attend this school. Very simply, as was mentioned previously, at Grace Christian Academy, the emphasis is on Christ. It's on Christ, on his church, and on his people. And you have the distinct honor and pleasure to influence these children, support these children, and labor beside them as they strive to gain a better comprehension of what is true and what is valuable for their future and ultimately for the kingdom of Christ, because that's what's most important. That is preeminent over the carnal education and understanding that anyone could receive. So, my exhortation to you very simply is support the school and understand that the present spaces that you occupy are soon going to be occupied by your children or your grandchildren or some other child in this world. And as a parent, as a citizen of this country, as a human being, what I would want is for the people that assume the position that I'm in to be able to stand firm against every form of human cunning and every deceitful scheme. And this classical education system accomplishes that. This classical education system, coupled with the gospel, accomplishes that in a most marvelous fashion. So in short, I try to give you a vivid picture, a colorful picture of why I love this school so much. But sadly, time constrains me, and Mr. Schultz, I am intimidated by him. So all I could do was give you just a black and white outline. But I'm going to encourage you, if you are around someone that has a student that attends Grace, ask them this question tonight. What is it about Grace Christian Academy that you love? And allow them to add the color that I am unable to add. Thank you.